Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mick Matvichuk. I'm with the UConn School of Business, the Career Development Office, and today we have round two, I should say, of our multi-series event of a variety of great career topics. Part two of today's session is networking tools and our elevator pitch, and we have a guest speaker from Otis Elevators, Jacqueline. Jacqueline, I'm going to butcher your last name. I apologize. It's Faro.
LaFaro.
LaFaro, got it. All right, perfect. Well, welcome and thank you so much for joining us today. We have some great information to share with everyone today virtually. As always, if you do have questions about networking or interviewing going forward, please feel free to reach out to our team here at the Career Office, as well as hopefully with Jacqueline as well, to give you some inside scoop about her company, as well as networking tips and tricks of the trade, if you will. So I definitely want to share the screen here, or actually Jacqueline already has shared the screen. So if you folks want to have any related questions, feel free to use the chat function to the lower right section of today's for today's event. Or just feel free to unmute yourself as well, and then go ahead and ask your questions. So without further ado, Jacqueline, I'm going to just pass over the baton and popcorn to you. Feel free to take it over.
Thank you, Mick. Well, thank you all so much for those of you that are joining live, or those of you that are watching this late at night sometime in the next couple of weeks. Thank you so much for joining. I'm Jacqueline, obviously. I am the Early Career Program Manager at Otis Elevator. So I manage all of the internship programs here and any kind of like entry-level, recent college grad type role. I am a UConn alum myself, not from the School of Business, although if I could go back, I probably would have gotten a business degree, but I have a liberal arts degree from UConn many, many moons ago. And so I'm excited to chat with you. I've been in talent acquisition and recruiting for about 15 years now, ever since I graduated from UConn. And so, a lot of the things that I'm going to tell you today are not rocket science, right? You're going to go, Jacqueline, duh. But a lot of people don't think of these things, or you forget about them when you're in the moment and you just like, what do I say? What do I do? So hopefully, when you're preparing for your next interview, career fair, what have you, you can think back to this, or, watch this again and be like, okay, these are the things that I'm supposed to do. Even though they sound natural in the moment, again, it's easy to forget them. So we'll talk about some interviewing tips, some networking tips, how to market and pitch yourself, and just some really cool things today. So the first thing we'll talk about is the dreaded, so tell me about yourself. You are going to get this at a career fair, on an interview. I mean, you get this all the time, right? And so now everyone knows about themselves, right? And it's easy to put something together, but when you're in that moment and someone tells you, tell me about, or asks you to tell them about you, all of a sudden it's like every thought about yourself goes out the window, right? And so you turn into this little guy here where it's like your brain explodes, you forget your name, you forget what year you graduated college, like it all goes out the window. So it's always good to rehearse these things beforehand, right? It's good to have some points that you want to say whenever you're asked this question. That way, when you're asked, on the moment, you're like, okay, I need to hit these 4 or 5 points. And so it's not something that you want to memorize verbatim, right? So you don't want to have this like lengthy speech that you're just regurgitating every time, but just a couple of points that you want to make sure to hit on. That way, when you're asked about yourself, you can have something that is, ready to go. And so an elevator pitch, this should be a very quick synopsis, right? Who you are, what you do, what you want to do. Those are like the 3 points I think that you should try to hit no matter what type of elevator pitch, right? And so like I said, this can be when you're going up to a company at a career fair and you just want to give like a quick, like, hey, this is who I am, this is what I want to do, here are some skills that I have. Or during an interview, many interviewers, not all, but many, the first thing they ask you when you sit down in that chair and you've got your water and they're like, okay, we're ready to go. The first thing is, so Jacqueline, tell me about yourself. And you're like, what do I say? I don't even know what to say about myself. So this is going to really help you be prepared. I would say 30 seconds to 1 minute max. You don't want to be too short. You don't want to go on forever. And I will tell you, I have interviewed my fair share, probably in the thousands of candidates at 20 years old, at 90 years old, at all walks of life, all stages in their career. And it's a difficult thing to do. I've had phone interviews or face-to-face interviews where tell me about yourself lasted 20, 30 minutes. And so you've run out of time at that point and they're giving you, the kitchen sink about themselves and their dog's names and all of that. But this portion, this elevator pitch, should really be quick, hitting a couple of different points, 30 to 1 minute max. And then the last point that I think is worth mentioning is keep it professional. You can add a little bit of flavor, right? You don't want to sound like a robot. You don't want to sound like every other student, but I would say 85%, work, school related, more professional related. And then you can give like 1 or 2 facts about yourself. Nothing too personal though. So, if it was me, I would say, I'm Jacqueline. Again, it would be a little lengthier, but I've been in talent acquisition for about 15 years. Here are some things that I've achieved. This is what I want to do. I'm from New York City and I love hiking in the mountains in my spare time. Like that quick, right? You're giving a little bit of personality outside of it, outside of work, outside of school, outside of the things that they're hearing all the time, right? So you've got a little bit of your own personality where maybe they can, connect with you a little bit, but you're not going so overboard where you're telling about, that you're divorced and you're on the dating apps and things like that. And I joke, but I've heard these things before many, many times. So it's a really fine balance of keeping it professional, but also making yourself unique and personable at the same time. So I'll pause here. Anybody have any questions about this at all?
That was great insight, Jacqueline. And you're keeping it really succinct and cohesive for students to know that, hey, tell me what you need to know as far as the details related to what I have to offer to this career, what experiences I bring to the table that are relevant. And I don't need to know that you enjoy eating PBJs and you went to, you know, elementary school out in the Midwest. I think that's so crucial and valuable that a lot of times when we get into these conversations during the interview process, and maybe even just networking, it just gets prolonged and extended and you hear the whole life story. It's not a confessional. It's an opportunity for you to engage and network with the hiring manager, especially that's overworked and overwhelmed and has probably another 40 students waiting in line to do the same thing. And you really want to make it impactful and not waste the recruiter's time, but also not waste your time along that way. So just tremendous insight.
Exactly. And also, I think that this is also, again, keeping it short and not the time to go through your entire resume, right? I think that's also what trips people up sometimes, especially in an interview. When you're asked this question, they'll start going through their entire 2-page resume. And some recruiters want to hear about that and some don't. So what I would suggest is keep this portion short. If that recruiter or that manager wants you to go through your resume, they will follow up and say, okay, can you now take me through your work history? And then you're going to go deeper. You're going to go through all of your jobs. You're going to go through why you left each job, why you chose this or that. And so then that's the time to go through that. But some recruiters are really good about, reviewing beforehand, and they don't need you to go through that whole entire resume. So that will really depend, right? But let them prompt you for that, as opposed to taking this question and making it about the resume review, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, cool. So this is just a quick example, and I highlighted here in different color is kind of the different sections, right? And I'm not going to read through the whole thing here, but basically, you know, Jonathan is talking about in this hot pink color here, you know, who he is, right? What he's been doing, a little bit about himself. Then in this white section here, he then starts to talk about why he wants to work for this company that he's pitching himself to, right? And then at this lighter pink here, this is kind of his closing, right? So what are the next steps? So you're hitting the different things, right? You're hitting about yourself, you're hitting why you'd be great for this job, and then that follow-up next steps. And I think it's a great way, especially if it's a career fair, you know, end it with, you know, what are the next steps? How, you know, how can we move forward with an interview? If it's during an interview, you know, ask about next steps, right? And we'll get into that a little bit. So again, keeping it concise, this probably would take someone, you know, 30 seconds to go through and speak through. And so, but you're hitting all of those different points that I think are really important.
Absolutely.
So we'll show you a fun video here. This is an elevator pitch winner from Utah State University. I think it's about a minute and change, but it's a really great example. And I think we'll kind of illustrate the things that we're saying today in real time. So I'll press play, and Mick, you let me know if everyone can hear this.
My name is Josh Light, and I'm the CEO of Cuphead. We believe that we have the most effective form of advertising available in the market today. Our advertisements are exposed to customers for 2,220 seconds on average. Now, what kind of advertising has that kind of exposure time? Ladies and gentlemen, we advertise on coffee cups. That's right, we put your brand in their hand. So how does coffee cup advertising work? Well, we got an advertiser. They pay us money. We produce paper coffee cups with their advertisement or brand on it. Then we give these coffee cups to coffee stands for free. Now, why does someone want to advertise on a coffee cup? Because it takes an individual 37 minutes to drink a cup of coffee on average. That person's going to have to look at the cup, drink, look at the cup, drink 20 times before it's fully consumed. And that person's going to move around like a mobile billboard, exposing that brand to at least 6 different individuals before that cup is drank. What's in it for Cuphead? We make 13 cents of profit on every single cup that we distribute. And what's in it for the coffee stands? Well, when most people think about coffee stands, they think about Starbucks. But what about the 25,000 coffee stands in this nation that have plain white cups like this? They don't have the economies of scale to put their own brand on the cup. So we give them free cups. They save $15,000 a year by not buying cups. They like these savings so much, ladies and gentlemen, that approximately 80% of the stands that we've contacted have signed exclusivity agreements to distribute our cups. What kind of momentum have we started for this company? The last month alone, we got 58 coffee stands in California to sign exclusivity agreements with us to distribute our cups. If we continue to get 58 coffee stands every single month, for the next 12 months, we will have 700 coffee stands at the end of the year. With 700 coffee stands, we can move 8 million cups a month. And at 13-cent profit, 8 million cups a month, we're making over $1 million of profit every single month. And we've already started this, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, our first customer, Overstock.com, will see their cups hit the California market in 21 days. Thank you very much.
And so I know that was different than what we're talking about. He wasn't pitching himself, right? He's pitching a product. But what I liked about this in particular was really, he was very concise, right? He didn't talk about one specific topic for the whole 2 minutes. He hit a couple of really quick points that I think overall by the end give you a really good picture of what he's trying to sell. And it's the same thing when you're doing an elevator pitch on yourself, right? When you're on an interview, when you're at a career fair, you're selling yourself, right? You're the product. And so I think this was a really good illustration of, you know, being concise, hitting a couple of different points, not dragging on about one thing or another, and then leaving really important things out, right? So you're just hitting on a couple of different things in, you know, a minute and change time span. Whoops. Okay, perfect.
And absolutely, Jacqueline, I was going to say that, you know, these kind of, you know, as far as the value proposition from that type of elevator pitch, you definitely saw the interest, you saw the passion behind, you know, that student's presentation. His confidence was there in that presentation as well. You could tell that he did the research. he definitely did practice. He practiced that probably multiple times, and it was very targeted and focused. He kept it within time. And that's the type of approach that's going to lock in, I think, an interview for candidates along the way when it comes to building a network, regardless of what it is, if it's selling a product or if it's really selling and promoting you. And that video definitely showed that what students have to do to be successful in order to really build the network.
Absolutely. Perfect. So anybody have any questions at all about elevator pitches? The next topic is related, but goes a little bit different of a path. So I just want to make sure nobody has any questions about an elevator pitch. And I think this is a great graphic here. Mick, actually, I give the credit to him. He was the one who came up with this. If you want to screenshot this, that way you have it for the future. This is really awesome because this, again, all of this makes sense, right? It sounds easy, but when you're putting it together, sometimes it's really difficult to, especially when you're talking about yourself, right? It's probably easier to sell a product than to sell yourself. I am someone, I don't talk about myself. I don't like to brag about myself. It's actually really funny. My manager got promoted and I have a different manager as of last week. And my old manager on our last one-on-one last week, she was actually saying to me, like, you never brag about yourself. Like, make sure when Lisa's your new boss, like you have to tell her like all the great things you're doing, but it just doesn't come naturally to me, right? And so it's the same thing when I'm doing an elevator pitch. I'm like, you don't want to come off too
Aggressive.
bragging about yourself, but want to be confident. So I think keeping an eye on these 6 points here, like it will help you remember all the different things that you really want to make sure that you touch when you're creating your elevator pitch. Perfect. All right. So next here, so this, how to create a lasting impression. And this is really, I think, going to help you when you're on an interview, right? So you were at the career fair, you did your little elevator pitch, you got an interview. These are the 3 things that I always tell people, no matter what stage of their career, I think are the 3 most important things to do on an interview. There are other important things, right? Like dress appropriately, but these 3 things, I think people forget or don't realize that they should do. And so these are the things that I always tell people. I tell my friends, my family, everyone. So the first thing, seem interested. You're like, duh, Jacqueline, like, why am I on this interview? Of course I'm interested. I will tell you that people get so nervous on a job interview that they're so worried about saying the right thing or making sure that they touch upon this, that sometimes they come off robotic, right? Or they're just sitting there and they're waiting for the interviewer to talk. And a manager will call me at the end of the interview and say, I really like that person on paper, right? Their resume was great, but when I was talking to them, they just didn't seem interested in the position. And I'm like, no, hiring manager Joe, I've spoken to them. I know they're interested, but it's not translating. So these are the things I really think are key and important. Show passion about your field. What does everyone love? When you love things, they love, right? So if you're interviewing for a financial accountant position, an accountant, let's say, and you're interviewing with the director of accounting, what does he love more than accounting? Maybe his dog and his kids, but he's gonna probably love accounting, right? So you need to sell him. Again, it's all sales at the end of the day. You need to make him feel that you are passionate about accounting because it's going to get him super excited about you. Show interest in this about the job, right? Even if it's not your dream job, you know what? No one has to know that besides you, right? So you want to make whomever you're interviewing with, whoever you're talking to about the position, feel like you want it. You're passionate about it. You're excited about it. And you need to be able to convey that because time and time again, managers will hire for enthusiasm, for passion over technical skills. You can have one resume where the person has awesome technical skills. They know accounting. They're awesome in accounting, right? and they're at the interview and the dialogue is just not good. This person doesn't seem like they want to be there. They don't even seem like they're interested in the job. Or maybe they've made comments about, just wanting to leave their past job because of XYZ, right? And so you want to get across that you want this job, and this job in particular, as opposed to just wanting any job. And so I have seen people, with less technical skills, less years of experience, less knowledge of the industry hired over someone who has that, because they came into the interview and they really sold that hiring manager on how much they want this job. And a hiring manager is willing to teach the technical skills, but you can't teach excitement and enthusiasm and passion and just plain interest in the job. And so I think it's so important to, come into the interview and be yourself, right? It's not about changing your personality, but it's just about conveying what you probably already feel inside about the role, but it's just about expressing that so that they are reading the same thing that you're feeling. So that's the first tip, super important. Second tip, I think, goes along with it. Be conversational. I think it's so hard sometimes as a candidate because you're allowing the interviewer to drive the interview, and that's okay. But there's nothing wrong with asking a question. If they say, hey, our company is going through a big financial shift, we're changing systems, we're going to this system, tell me about your experience with this new system that we're having. You can answer that question, and then you can say, this is really exciting that you're changing systems. What was the old system you were working on? Why did you make that change? So you're asking questions and you're being conversational, you're sticking to the topic. But again, it's all about showing that interest, right? Being conversational goes back to number one. You are answering their questions, but you're engaging with them as well. And so that's going to show your interest in the role. And B, people want to work with people that they're going to get along with, right? So if you're someone who you're not clicking with the interviewer and it doesn't feel like to them that you're someone that they're going to want to converse with, work with day in and day out, side by side in a cubicle, they may go for that person that has less skills, less technical skills, less years of experience, but someone that they can have a good conversation with, someone they can dialogue with and get the job done by conversing. So really, really important, to try to be as conversational and as engaging as possible. And then the last thing, again, goes along with all of the other ones, ask questions. I've done many, many interviews where, at the end I say, okay, what questions do you have? And they go, no, you did a great job of answering everything. I have no questions. Ask something, right? It doesn't matter what it is. Even if you know the answer, ask it anyway. Ask them why they joined the company. Ask them if they're at the company for 20 years, what keeps you at the company? If they just joined the company, what made you decide to join Otis Elevator, from your last company? Just ask something. Again, it's showing your interest, it's showing your engagement, it's making it conversational, and people, they want you to ask those questions. So again, I think it's really, really important. Just have a couple in your head and, try to create that dialogue with them.
Jacqueline, what a powerful message that you're really just hitting on target. Build rapport. People are people, and they want to get to know who you are as an individual, and they want to build that connection. And if you're going to taste like bitter coffee throughout the interview, you're not going to get very far through that process. So to me, that's you really just hit it on point that you have to build that network rapport, and there's a trust factor along the way. If you build trust, you establish trust during the interview, during the network process. If you attend these events, if you go to a career fair, you go to a career Tuesday, you're building that trust and network. And then that interview process is going to be so much smoother, especially when you're building the interpersonal communication skills along the way, strengthening those skills to make that interview more successful. it's going to resonate and it's going to shine when you go through that process, I think. So just tremendous points. I couldn't have said it better. You said it, right on the money.
I'm very passionate about this topic because, all my friends and family know I'm in recruiting. And so after they don't get the interview, or they don't get the job, rather, they come to me and they say, well, this is what I did. And, they asked me 5 questions and I thought I answered them. And then I would say, well, what else did you do? What do you mean? They asked me questions, I answered them, and then I went home. I cried in my car because it didn't go very well. And so, well, what questions did you ask them? What follow-up questions? And so it's all about creating that dialogue. So I'm super passionate about this space, and I love to mock interview with people because, again, there's such easy things when you're looking at them on a slide. Like, of course I would do this, but people fail to do it time and time again. And so, I think just kind of seeing it in, I was going to say black and white, in blue and white here, it really goes a long way.
Absolutely.
All right, so, just some interview etiquette. And again, this goes hand in hand with all the other things that I've been talking about. Again, sounds simple and almost silly, but smile on your interview. This goes with number 1 here. Seem like you want to be there. Seem like you are interested in the role. Again, it's not about changing your personality. And I'll be honest, I hate when people tell me to smile. I am not an extrovert by nature. I'm actually super introverted in my personal life. And I'm not someone who goes around smiling all the time. But when I'm in an interview and the manager is getting really excited about this new accounting system that they're launching, I am smiling and I am nodding along with them, and I am making them know that I am extremely excited about this financial system that I know nothing about, obviously, but I'm there with them because they're getting excited. So I am getting excited too. So smile is just a very short way of saying, again, make it seem like you are excited about all the things that they're talking about. Be concise. Again, we talked about the elevator pitch. Be concise. Any question that they are asking you, try to be as concise as possible. And I know it's really, really difficult because sometimes it's hard to formulate an answer on the spot, especially when they're asking you the behavioral interviewing questions and you're trying to, in your head, come up with one of these situations. And so you start rambling. I've done it before myself, but I think just a reminder to try to be as concise as possible, try to stick with the question that they're asking you. And there will be, other additional time for you to also add in, some additional information at the end of the interview. If you feel like there are different points that you want to get across that maybe you didn't have a chance to during the interview questions, but try to be concise. You have, you're there for an hour, they're there for an hour, and you want to make sure you get to all of the points that you want to get to. You get to ask all the questions that you want to ask, and they get to ask you all of the questions that they want to as well. If the entire hour we're still answering question number 1, you're both going to leave feeling frustrated that you don't know each other very well, right? So be concise. Again, I put it, ask questions, ask questions, ask questions. At the end of your interview, always ask about next steps. Again, this is reconfirming your interest. Normally, or often, the recruiter, the hiring manager, whomever you're interviewing with, they may say, okay, next step from here is to interview with, my manager, Susan, but they may not, right? They may just forget, or it might just not be something that they say. So if they miss that point, ask them at the end, as they're wrapping up, say, I really enjoyed speaking with you. I'm extremely interested in this position. This time with you even reconfirmed my interest in the position. What are the next steps from here? You're doing a couple of things there, right? You're telling them that you're interested. You're complimenting them that they did such a good job in this interview in reconfirming your interest, and you're setting the stage for next steps. And so hopefully from there, they'll say, next step from here is an interview with my manager, Susie. We'll give you a call tomorrow, or let's set that up right now, or whatever it might be. Their process can be different, right? So make sure you ask about next steps at the end. Always send a thank you email. I would say that day, it doesn't need to be that hour, but sometime before the end of that day, send a thank you email. I still get some letters in the mail or thank you cards in the mail, which are amazing. And I, hang them up, but don't forget the email, right? Because sometimes decisions are made super, super quick. And by the time I get those cards, sometimes the decision has already been made. So while I think they're nice and I love them, don't replace your in the moment email with the card. You can do both. And I think that is greatly appreciated, or you can stick with just the email. And I think that is sufficient as well. And then following up appropriately. This is a hard, fine balance as well, right? You don't want to come off too aggressive, but you also want to make sure that they remember you and remember you're interested. So here's what I would do. I always send my email day one, right? So the day that I interview, a couple of hours later, and then based on what they've told you about next steps, I would wait until the day after that time period has come and gone. So if they say, I will call you tomorrow with next steps, let that whole day pass. And then maybe the following day, reach out and say, hey, I just wanted to, make sure that, yada, yada, for next steps. If they tell you during that interview, we have a lot of candidates this week, we're not going to set up next steps until next Monday, let that whole time pass. And then if you haven't heard from them by, say, Tuesday or Wednesday, reach out then. So I think a day or two after they've kind of given you that window is appropriate, right? If they told you on Monday, they're not making a decision until the next Monday, you don't want to follow up every day that week because they've already set the stage that they're not going to, get back to you in that time period. But if next Monday has come and gone, you also don't want to continue waiting too long because recruiters get busy, hiring managers get busy, they're humans too, right? So sometimes getting your name on their screen also is a gentle reminder to them of, oh, we need to make a decision, or, oh, we need to move on with next steps with these two candidates that we really like. So a gentle reminder is good, but again, you don't want to come off too aggressively as well. So it's a fine balance. Anybody have any questions here? Any real life type of examples?
Jacqueline, I definitely have a question for you. As
Yeah.
far as the students that really make it that impact of connecting and or networking rather with you or other recruiters at Otis, what are the ones that are really making that lasting impression and saying, hey, we really want to bring this person in? Are they really hitting all these points? What are you seeing that really makes those potential candidates really successful as a major takeaway? I'm sure when you go to a fair, you probably have 40, 50 plus students that will engage with you. And out of that group, which are the ones that are really drawing in your attention, that are making that difference?
Yeah, and I think these points that I've been talking about. So I'll give you a real example. I was at the University of Southern California 2 weeks ago, and we have a bunch of sales and marketing positions available, right? And most students' resumes are pretty similar, right? You have your major, you have maybe one internship, another job. It's not like you're interviewing for a VP that it's got, 7-page resume, thankfully, right? So, resumes on paper are often very, very similar, but it is that engagement that makes you remember someone at the end. So we probably spoke with 100 candidates for all different positions. And I remembered one young lady that just came up to us and was just so interested and so excited. And she was like, I knew you were here. I came here specifically for you guys. I'm super interested in the position. Like she made me feel her interest. And again, maybe that was just her selling me. I'll never know. But that evening when I got back to my hotel room, she was the resume that I went through and I picked out and I emailed the manager in California that evening. And that was it. So that was all it took. Whereas other students would come by, and again, it happens, right? Not everybody knows who Otis Elevator is. So it doesn't disqualify you, but it definitely sets you apart when you come there and you are all about Otis and all about that position. And this is any company, right? Whatever company you're interviewing with, when you're all about them, you feel honored, right? And so I remembered her, and she's actually getting an offer today. She really
That's
is.
awesome.
And so it's just so funny, right? You can put all this time into your resume, and all of those things are important, but at the end of the day, I think there are things like this, the soft skills are really what set people apart.
That's so true. So true.
All right. So preparing for an interview, right? So I've told you all these things to do on the interview and how to sell yourself. But these are some tips on, how do you prepare yourself for these types of things, right? So people always ask me, and again, maybe it's because I've been doing this for so long, but they're like, can I have notes on the interview? Can I bring a notebook? And the answer is yes, yes, yes. Not only can you, but you should. And so I think that having a notebook or having something to write on, a pen and paper, is twofold on an interview. A, you can make notes beforehand that you can reference back. Notes on the company, notes on your achievements, notes on, different things that you want to bring up, maybe some questions that you've drafted. So it's going to help you do that. And then it is also going to allow you to take notes on things that they say as well. And what is that doing when I'm talking about my new accounting system and you're jotting it down and you're like, oh, this is so interesting. You are showing your engagement and your interest in the position. So I think it's really, really twofold and achieves both of those things so well. So back to preparing, right? So make notes on the company, write some different things down. Again, you don't want to write whole paragraphs, right? But write some key points. And anything like the size of the company, the year they were founded, what their mission is, but just again, key points, key words, key bullets. That way, when you're sitting before the interview, or if you have a round of interviews where you're meeting with 3 different people, you can look real quick at your notes and just refresh yourself, right? Make notes on yourself. So again, you all know yourself, right? You have your resume there, but maybe there are a couple of achievements that you want to make sure that you mention during that interview, or certain numbers, right? So if we're back to the accounting system example, maybe you've done that in the past before. And so if you're reading on the job description that they are looking to upgrade their accounting system, and you did that at a previous company, make a note of that. Make a note of, how many times more quickly they can process payroll now, right? And so maybe it's not a number that you think of in your head, but, on your paper, you can put, 3 times faster dash payroll system. And so when you're in the interview, you're going to know what that little shorthand means. And so when they're asking you questions, you can bring up these things that, again, when you're preparing, about, but when you're in that interview, your brain explodes and you forgot all of these different things. So it's good to have them written down so you can just, refer back. Also, I think, it's good to write them down anyway, because what does writing do? It reinforces those things. So even if you don't refer back to it on paper during the interview, you're going to remember writing it down the evening before. And so it'll come to you a little bit more quickly. Third point here, I always have a couple of canned situations that I refer back to for my behavioral type questions, right? Most behavioral interview questions, they're tough, right? I'll be honest. I've been doing this for a long time. I hate behavioral interview questions because it's so hard sometimes on the spot to think of a situation, right? And so I have, and I've been doing a long time, so now they come naturally. But when I first started interviewing, I would write down a couple of situations, again, not full paragraphs, but maybe just a couple of points that you could use for different types of questions, right? So there are some situations that maybe, it was a disappointed customer. That's going to be a question you get a lot, because that spans lots of different roles. Like, tell me about a time that you had to deal with a disappointed customer, client, coworker, whatever it is. And so have a situation kind of in your mind, jot down a couple of a couple of points. That way you can, refer back to it really quickly. What's another common one? Like, tell me about a time where, you made a process improvement. So these are, questions, they're all very similar at the end of the day. And so if you have a couple of almost canned type of situations, depending on, how they ask the question and what the format, you can kind of switch up your answer, but at least you have a baseline of something to start with already prepared, so that you're not coming up with something from, the ground basically every single time they're asking you a question. So that's what I also prepare. And then again, I know I said it a million times, but jot down in your notebook some questions you'd ask the interviewer. It's hard when you're in the situation in the moment to think of them on the spot. So just jot down a couple of questions, even if you don't use all of them. That's fine, but you have a couple to choose from. So maybe they've answered some of the questions that you've asked, but you still have a couple of other ones that you can say, oh, and tell me a little bit more about XYZ. And so this is how I prepare for every interview that I do still to this day when I'm a candidate.
Some great advice, Jacqueline. I have to say, like, even thinking about jotting down, taking notes, and during that interview process or networking engagement, maybe there's something that you forgot to mention, and now you can follow up and actually incorporate that into a thank you note.
Yeah.
It's full cycle. Like, there's so many ways that this networking could be so much more successful in the interview or in a career fair, that showing that interest and jotting down notes truly makes a difference. You
Absolutely.
see it. You see the candidate's interest.
Exactly.
Just great value. Really great stuff.
So, all right. And then just some last couple of tips. LinkedIn prep. I think, LinkedIn it was first starting when I entered the working world, and it has just become such a great resource. For LinkedIn, connect with people on LinkedIn, use it to prepare, use it to read about the company. Always look up who you're going to be interviewing with, right? And so again, back to my point before about, come up with some question, why have you been at the company for 20 years? Or why did you just join the company last year? And you won't know those things until you look at their LinkedIn profile, right? Use it to make connections, use it to network, and people will really appreciate that you've taken the time to learn about them the same way they're interested in learning about you as well. Because an interview is not just about a company interviewing a candidate or a company evaluating a candidate. You are evaluating the company, you are evaluating the manager just as much as the interviewer is evaluating you. Mick, anything you wanted to add here?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Jacqueline, too. I mean, as far as building that network, and following up a conversation with you or a coworker from Otis, do you encourage students to ask for business cards at a career fair and then follow that up with LinkedIn? Is that like, a common practice, or do you encourage students to ask for that?
Yeah, I see a lot of people at career fairs doing away with business cards. I always bring business cards. Again, it's hard, right? I think of it from the candidate perspective. You guys have the opportunity to meet with 30, 40, 50 companies in one day, right? And so sometimes having that business card in your hand at the end of the day that you can go through, as opposed to, you scribbled it down or you took a photo of it or whatever it is, I do think that it's worthwhile to ask. Again, not everyone's going to have them, but if they do, I would definitely, take it from them. And a lot of times they may say, oh, I don't have business cards anymore. I've done away with those, but here is my LinkedIn, name. Let's connect right now. So you're making that connection in some way, but everybody's doing it differently these days, I think.
Absolutely. No, fantastic. Thank you.
Hi, Jacqueline. I have a quick question. Can you hear me? Yeah, sure. During our interview, so when we encountered the situation that we didn't know, we didn't know how to respond with the question, or like we are just so nervous, so like we have a blanket brain to answer. So when we facing this situation, like how do you suggest us to to help us to think and like to reorganize our answers?
Yeah, it happens, honestly. It really, really does. And I think so, you know, the first part, I think if you, especially for the behavioral questions, right? If you prepare beforehand a couple of different situations, you can often mold most, you know, if you have 4 or 5 situations, you can probably mold those situations to respond and have a response for that interviewer, right? So have a couple of very general things, you know, real things that happen to you, right? But things that you can mold into different answers. So I think that really, really helps. And then you know what? Sometimes it happens where they throw you a curveball, they ask something that you have just not prepared for, and you cannot think of something. So I think it's okay in those situations where you really, really can't think of something to just say, you know, I really want to think through this question a little bit. You know, do you mind if we move on to something else and then we can circle back to it at the end? Again, it's not ideal, right? You feel awful in that situation that you're not answering the question, but instead of taking too long to think of something and letting too much time pass where you're not engaging with them, then, you know, I think that goes in the opposite direction as well. So if you've taken, you know, 15, 20 seconds, you really are drawing a blank, I would ask them if you can come back to it. And I've never heard of an interviewer saying, no, we cannot do that. And I'll be honest with you, insider tips, sometimes they forget to go back to the question and then you get a freebie and they never ask it again. And they've gone on to other things because you've answered all the other questions so well. So I think it's okay to do that in those situations. But I think the preparation beforehand with coming up with different situations is also going to help, you know, minimize the amount of times that that happens. Great
Thank you
question.
so much. And I also have another question. So,
Yeah.
as we answer the behavior question, we follow the STAR rule, which is
Mm-hmm.
situation, task, action, and result. When I do the behavior question, like answering, I found myself kind of weak when I do the conclusion after the result. Just basically, like I just said, okay, I completed this project, but I didn't have like a really strong conclusion to show how what skills or what kind of things I learned from those experience. So how do you suggest me to improve these weakness?
Yeah, I know. I probably sound like a broken record, but just prepare them beforehand, right? Come up with a couple of those different types of situations, whether it's in school when you're working on a project. So, you know, it doesn't always have to be work related, right? Especially at this stage in your career. It can be a project, it can be a situation that you've had with one of your professors. It really can be anything. And oftentimes it's more about how you're answering the question than even what the situation was, right? Again, a lot of the interviewers want to make sure that you're following that method. And so just come up with a couple of different situations beforehand, and be able to verbalize how you made the impact, right? It doesn't normal the interviewer cares less about what the situation was or what happened beforehand. It's really the impact that you made and what you did to change those results. So again, I think just thinking through it beforehand, and again, you know, you'll see that you'll start to use the same situations over and over again for different questions. I've been using one situation since 2011. I use it in almost every single interview. I change up which parts I tell. It was something big that happened to me at work. But again, you'll start to use the same ones. And I know that I'm probably going to use that situation on every interview that I have from here till the end of time. And I can mold it in a way that gets the point across for different types of situations. So it's really just about preparing it beforehand.
Thank you for your answer. So as a follow-up, do you
Yeah.
think is it too straightforward for me as an applicant to see I show my leadership skill or another skills at the start of the beginning of the interview when I do the elevator pitch, or do you think I should like summarize or using the strong verbs to replace the skills I want to describe?
I don't think there's anything wrong with mentioning it. Again, I think it's something that you want to touch upon, and hopefully your elevator pitch is also intriguing them to then ask you follow-up questions. So, you can say, I don't know what your background is, obviously, but I have experience in XYZ. These are the types of skills that I have. I have really strong leadership skills from my time as president of the sorority, or whatever it might be. This is why I'm interested in this opportunity. And then they may come back to you and say, well, tell me a little bit more. How were you a leader? What did you do to lead? And so you're just kind of piquing their interest with these like little tiny nuggets of information. And whatever they're really interested in, they're then going to follow up with you and ask you to elaborate a little bit more.
Thank you so much for those valuable advice.
I hope
They are
that
really
helped.
helpful during my.
What else? Anybody else have any other questions?
Just got to say, Jacqueline, great insight, a lot of great value, and it makes me think too about some tips and strategies when it comes to the networking piece, or even as well as the interview. Is a lot of times when we have those situations where a student may, going for that entry level job, and they just a continuum, it's a run on for that answer, or it's crickets. And you're quite not sure, did they finish that answer? Are they still answering it? A strategy I always tell students is think about the question originally, what was asked. And if the question was, tell me about yourself, feel free to end with the question and say, and that's a little bit about me. It's just a great way to put the brakes on, to know that you've answered your question, and then the panel or interviewers ready to move on to the next question. So that's a little tip for you guys to take away as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, a lot of people will end that with so yeah, because they don't know
Exactly.
they don't know what else to say. It's awkward for them. I get it. So that's a really good tip.
Perfect. Well, Jacqueline, just wanted to say, I know we're over time here. I just wanted to say thank you to you and to Otis for your commitment to the University of Connecticut, and providing tremendous value and insight about career in general, and how to be successful in the networking process, giving some great tips and insights, and actually real experiences also that you've had along in your career. So thank you so much. We look forward to having you back on campus. And we wish you tremendous success in Nevada.
Thank you. Thank you. For those of you who missed it, I'm moving to Nevada this weekend from Florida. So that's
Oh, that's exciting, but we will miss you. You've been so wonderful. And
no, you won't know I'm gone. I'm in Florida right now, so I'm still a plane ride away from you guys now. So now I'll just be an extra hour and change plane ride, but you'll see me just as much.
well, we had a lot of fun planning the whole Otis elevator pitch kind of spin.